The change process and how schools change with technology. So we're going to look at three pieces of background first. Hall and Horde teach us that change is a process. Rogers teaches us that some are quick while others are slow to adopt changes. And Bruce teaches us that innovation must be judged differently in each situation. So we're going to focus on three different things in this talk. First of all, we're going to look at innovations, then we're going to look at the individuals within the system, and then we're going to look at school cultures. So first of all, innovations. We're looking at a situated evaluation model from Bertram Bruce. And so model one that he looks at is the most common model for innovation. It's the innovation-centered model, and I like to summarize that as when all you have is a hammer, all your problems look like nails. And in this situation, the innovation is the chief actor. It comes into a situation and it does something. And the innovation is an idealization, so we have an idea of what this should do, and that's our goal. We're looking to do whatever it is that this innovation is supposed to do. And any deviations from that idealized innovation are bad. But in reality, the innovation is but one small addition to a complex social system. Instead of seeing it as the primary instrument of change, it is better to see it as a tool that is incorporated into ongoing processes of change. And we are thus led to a different model for implementation of innovations. In this model, the active agents are not innovations, but the participants in the setting in which the innovation is placed. Participants interpret the innovation and then recreate it as they adapt it to fit with institutional and physical constraints and with their own goals and practices. So that leads us to Bruce's second model, the social system-centered model. And I like to summarize that as, how can you use a hammer when all your problems aren't nails? And so in this case, participants are the chief actors. And the innovation comes in, but it's coming into a situation that already exists. And so the innovation is merely an idealization. So we have an idea of what we want the innovation to do, but that's not necessarily our goal. And then the innovation, as it comes into this existing situation, is recreated and reinterpreted by the participants. And in the first model, deviations were bad. In this model, deviations from that idealization are expected. We know that the innovation is being recreated and reinterpreted, and it's going to be different in every situation. And that's what Model 3 tells us, is that every situation is different. And so when an innovation is introduced into different situations, there's no longer a single innovation, but a series of recreated and reinterpreted innovations. And they might work well in one place, not so well in another, or work well in different places, but work differently in those different places. So we can no longer evaluate innovations based on their similarity to some ideal. Instead, we must take into account the context, culture, and constraints of each situation and how the participants interact with the innovation in context. And I did some research that extends this model a bit to support for innovations, because support for innovations is very similar to innovation itself. We often view that support with the first model. It's this formal mechanism of support, like in-service training or financial support to buy stuff, and support and its effects are compared to some idealized version of what the support should achieve, and support is the chief actor. So we could imagine that we create this staff development program and we implement it everywhere and expect it to do something, the same thing in every situation. And situated evaluation tells us that's not really the case. So support, like an innovation, enters an existing situation with its own context, culture, and constraints. And the support that's offered is recreated and reinterpreted by the participants in the situation, and every situation is going to be different. So we've got to take into account that context, culture, and constraints of the existing situation when we're evaluating support for innovations. So here's an example of how the distortion and recreation of support happened in my study. So this is Jennifer, not her real name, took a summer workshop about technology. And the goals of this workshop were to have a strong beginning for technology, so she should be able to do something right from the start in her classroom, then integrate the computer into the curriculum and continue to use it throughout the year. In actual use, she did have a strong beginning. She had a strong training session for her class. She brought the class to the lab, and they learned how to do stuff, and they got going with some stuff, and it was a very good beginning. And then after that, minimal use. And then after that, she found that her class really had a lot of management problems, and the technology wasn't helping with the management problems. She was not skilled with the technology enough to manage a classroom and the technology. She was very skilled in classroom management. In fact, the reason why she had so many management problems was because she was so skilled that the administration was sending students to her that might need that extra attention from her. And then later in the year, she got an aide who led to some renewed use because that helped to alleviate some of the classroom management issues. So this support came into the situation, and it didn't work the way it was supposed to, and we can see some of the reasons why it didn't work quite that way, but she had a lot of constraints. And so she needed additional things to make that innovation and that support for innovation work for her.